Hello, beautiful beings. I have an exciting episode today. Recently, I was on the Ians podcast that is hosted here by Betty Guadagno. And we decided to do a little bit of a swap. I had such a good time with her, and she has such great information to share that I thought it'd be really exciting to have an episode with her on it. This is a transformational coach and podcast host, near-death like experiencer, who currently hosts the podcast for IANS, which is the International Association for Near-Death Studies, Betty Guadagno. Welcome.
Thanks so much. Grateful to be here.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. After the podcast, we started having some really exciting conversations pertaining to the topic of twin flames, and thought it would be really cool to move that on to a more open discussion. And you said you had some really great stories. So I think first and foremost, shall we introduce the concept of twin flames?
Definitely. You'll hear about twin flames a lot right now, especially right now in our collective. It's like very buzz. So the concept of a twin flame, it's supposed to be like a next level soulmate. So each soul is incarnate with a divine masculine and a divine feminine energy. Doesn't matter what avatar, what human body you chose to be born into. Every single living conscious being has a masculine attribute and a feminine attribute. And this is proven in science when you talk about left brain and right brain thinking. So the concept of twin flames is that it's one soul split into two physical bodies, and they're supposed to be very advanced souls, and they're here to assist Earth with the ascension process. Twin flames are typically people who choose very challenging life experiences because they're transmuting negative energy for the entire collective. So you'll see common markers of addiction or sexual trauma, definitely interpersonal relationship issues, codependency, things like that. So these are assignments that they've taken on for the whole collective itself and in the dynamic between the twins.
This isn't a new concept. There is some historical aspects to this, which Hindu mythology touches on the concept of twin flames through Shiva and Parvati, the splitting. Also, Plato had mentioned in Symposium a little bit regarding the concept of twin flames. So what I like to elaborate on is that because we are hearing a lot more about this in terms of content creation on YouTube and online and in the spiritual community. And there is a little bit of a divide in the spiritual community because there are those who I would say a little bit more conservative in terms of concepts and can see that how this paradigm, this concept of twin flames has entered into a little bit of a toxic arena and is being abused to some degree. And then there's some members of the community, and one of them, Matthias de Stefanos, I think really brings up some beautiful information regarding twin flames. So if you're ever very curious in what he has to say, he has some YouTube videos available. But I know that you have some experiences with this concept, and I think they're really fun to share. Can you delve into them a little bit?
Yeah, I'll just also add to what you shared that the history of twin flames, it's represented in every pantheon. Every mythological family has a representation of a divine feminine, divine masculine. Isis and Osiris in Egypt, Hera and Zeus in Greek mythology, Jesus and Magdalene in Christian mythology. So this is not a new concept. I love that you were talking about the history of it. And then the other thing that you mentioned was about this abuse. I think that the concept of twin flames is one more form of distraction for us. Of course, we're always looking for love outside of ourselves. And so I just like to think of Jesus as my twin flame, like Jesus is my boyfriend. Jesus is the person that I want to connect with the most. That's my masculine energy. Let me just focus on that because that's the internal journey. Definitely, of course, we want to romanticize every concept because we think that love is found outside of us. But so, yeah, I'll share a little bit about my own journey. I'll share that my origin story is that I was a drug addict, homeless prostitute when I had my near-death-like experience in 2019. So I had really hit the bottom of rock bottom, completely, yeah, there's no words. I got some pictures of me before and after, like you would not even believe that it's the same person. But I grew up in a family of addicts, and I grew up very impoverished, and my parents both committed suicide in 2007 together from their addiction, not only to drugs but to each other. And so I watched a lot of really toxic behavior modeled to me throughout my life, and my addiction at some point became my parent. Shortly after my parents died, it became my guiding star. It became my higher power. And I was also a staunch militant atheist in my life before my spiritual experience, because I had experienced a lot of really messed up stuff in my life. And so I didn't want to believe in a creator that would allow those kinds of things to happen to me. And when I had an overdose in 2019, which was the catalyst to my near-death like experience, I was shown a lot of stuff. I was downloaded with this template of the twin flame journey. So I saw myself as the divine feminine archetype in every mythological family, including that of Adam and Eve. So I saw myself in the garden and the fall of humanity, the fall of creation, the idea that we originally created the earth experience to be, and then having this fall, this death, this spiritual suicide. They correlated it to my human parents' physical suicide, to my eternal parents' spiritual suicide. So when I saw Adam and Eve in the garden, I watched them fall out of their spiritual bodies and into this human form. And at first I thought that it was just me. I was like, oh my God, I'm Eve. I destroyed creation. This is crazy. And that my mind just couldn't wrap around the concept of oneness yet. I didn't understand that's everybody. It's not just me. I'm not some kind of savior. We are all infinitely special. We are all the savior. We're all the one. In my spiritual experience, I also was taken through the details of my pre-birth plan. So I was shown that I, as a soul, had actually designed my life before I got here. Now, if I tell you some of my life experiences again, drug addiction, homelessness, prostitution, sexual trauma, all throughout my life. I was also not just a traumatized person. I was a traumatized person who maliciously traumatized other people. Okay. I was a ruthless abuser in my life, and I had done a lot of harm. I was a racist. I was a rapist. I was just a maniacal, manipulative liar of a human being. And because those were my survival skills. And so I was shown in my pre-birth planning that I had actually chosen all of that. I had picked all of these life experiences. And in the moment of being downloaded with this belief, I instantly shifted out of my victim mentality, which was my main personality profile. I wore my victimization as a cloak around me all day, every day. I thought that my sad story could get me sympathy, could evoke emotion. Maybe I could get money or drugs out of people if I made them feel bad enough for me. And so this moment of this awareness came into my perception, and my whole life transformed. It felt like 2 tons of garbage had been released from my spirit, because things had no longer happened to me. They actually happened for me, because on some soul level, I had chosen it for the evolvement of myself. Now, my human mind cannot understand how picking a life experience like childhood sexual trauma could evolve me as a spirit. But I don't need an explanation today, because I have unwavering faith and belief that my soul knows what's best, that everything is working in divine right order. And so I don't need a human explanation for any of the spiritual things that are going on with me. So my experience with the pre-birth planning, and I was also shown that I was here for the Great Awakening. Again, when I went into my experience, militant atheist, never heard any of these words. I had never heard of a chakra. I didn't know what a spiritual awakening was, because I didn't believe in anything like that. This was nowhere in my radar. And I was also downloaded with the awareness of the Great Awakening. So I was told that I'm a divine spiritual soldier sent here on a mission to uplift the consciousness of the planet from a level of 3rd dimensional thinking to 5th dimensional thinking. And I do that just by being myself. I'm not here to preach or teach or proselytize. I'm just here to be a shining example that Awakening is available to literally anybody. If it's available to me, everybody's waking up, okay? And I don't have to do anything to make that happen. My light radiates and that creates a ripple and opens up a grid, and I don't have to do anything. But at first I thought that it was some sort of tangible mission. Like I had to shake people awake. I had to do things. I had to shout from rooftops. And it was a beautiful scene, the scene of the download of the Great Awakening. I found myself, it felt like at the deck of a spaceship, and there was a commander in the center. And you can call that commander Christ or Krishna or Buddha or Source or unconditional love, because it's all the same thing, just different languages for different cultures. And the commander was like, hey, let's do this. And there was thousands of other souls around me, and we were all gearing up for our jump to Earth. And I've met some of the people that were on that deck with me. I've met the members of my jump team, of my soul family, and we've been able to open up grids to love with each other just by being with each other and communicating with each other. So one of the catalysts to my spiritual awakening was that I had met this man. And the events leading up to meeting this man were on Halloween of 2018. I was charging my phone. I had an 8% charge on my phone. It was 8:08 p.m. and I had $88.88 in my bank account. I was looking at my bank account. And so all of these eights, and I had never been aware of sequences of numbers before. Now I have awareness that that's something that's very popular in spiritual awakening. But at this moment, I was just like, that's weird. I took a screenshot of it. And again, this is Halloween. This is a day that the veil is very thin for many people. And I just went about my life. And then 8 days later, I met this man who is my twin flame. And his life path number in numerology is 8. And I found out that so is mine. And we spent a couple of days together, and this man was the mirror image of me. It was crazy. He reflected back to me everything about myself. So at that point in my life, I was a drug addict. I thought that I was some kind of quote unquote party girl. I was just a hedonist, debaucherous mess. And this dude was the male version of that. And so I was all about it. I was like, oh my God, we're going to die together. This is going to be amazing. I was like, this is the dude that I'm supposed to use with until we both die. This is going to be great. And after spending a couple of days together on a drug-fueled bender, we just parted ways, and he wanted nothing to do with me after that. And I became obsessed, which is a pattern in my life. He's not the first person that I've been obsessed with. Hopefully he'll be the last. But so I became totally obsessed. I kept making fake phone numbers because he kept blocking me, and I was making all these internet numbers, and I'm like, please, I think that we're supposed to know each other. Please talk to me. And months went by, and his voice was actually the voice that guided me into my spiritual experience in heaven. And again, presented itself as my divine masculine counterpart. But I didn't know what really any of that meant. And then once I came back from my spiritual experience, information about twin flames showed up in my life, and I began to have a deeper understanding of it. So then I became way more obsessed. And I went to this guy's house, and I knocked on his window, and he came outside, and he was like, this is psychotic. You cannot be here. And I was like, listen, we're from another dimension, and we're cut from the same cloth, and we're supposed to be together. And this isn't even who we really are. These are just our 3D avatars. We're actually playing a video game, and you and I are partners in the game, and we're supposed to be together. What do you think? And he was like, I think that you are a fucking psycho. He was like, get away from me. And I just could not let it go. I was so open after my spiritual experience, and I was hearing such loud guidance to go and do this. And I kept telling my guidance, I'm making a fool of myself. I'm too beautiful to make a fool of myself. Please stop. I don't want to be doing this right now. And they were like, you have to share the information. He has to know. And I was totally embarrassed. I just kept embarrassing myself. And then I was just reminded of my spiritual experience, where I understood that this is a dream that we live inside of, and nothing is real. So who cares if you embarrass yourself? It's not even real. It doesn't matter. So I went back a couple days later to his house, and again, this great sense of urgency. And now I understand that spirit does not work in urgency. So I'm not really sure what was pulling me to do this. I think that it was some sort of last thread that was really letting go, because spirit is patient, spirit is tolerant, spirit's never going to insist that you do something right away. I don't think so anyway. I think about verses in the Bible, Jonah the prophet, and God was like, you have to tell them about this prophecy. And he was like, nah, I'm not going to do it. And then eventually he did. And it was just to embarrass himself, right? God was like, yeah, you know what? The prophecy's not going to happen anymore. But you did your job and you told what you were supposed to tell. So I went to his house a couple days later, and I broke into this man's apartment. Okay, this is like totally insane and psychotic. I do not recommend doing this, by the way. So I break into his house. Him and his girlfriend are there, by the way. Okay. I've woken them up. It's 6:00 in the evening. They're still sleeping because, again, like they're party people. So they're asleep in the middle of the day. And this is crazy. You have to go. But I knew that he wasn't going to call the police on me because he was a drug dealer and he had a lot of drugs in his house. And I was like, call the cops. I was like, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving until you remember. You have to remember who we are to each other. And he was like, this is totally insane. And then him and his girlfriend both kept threatening to harm me with violence, obviously, because I had broken into their home. And I just kept knowing, like, I'm divinely protected. No harm's going to come to me. Nothing bad is going to happen. I don't have to worry about that aspect of this. And then I got downloaded with Plato's allegory of the cave, which, if you're unfamiliar with that branch of philosophy, you can think of the movie The Matrix, because The Matrix is our modern day version of Plato's allegory of the cave. And basically, the allegory of the cave says that there's these three prisoners, they're trapped inside of a cave, and all they see are shadows on the wall. And they believe that's reality. And they're totally comfortable in their discomfort. They're okay not knowing what's casting the shadows. Is this real? One day, one of the prisoners breaks free, escapes the cave, goes outside and sees the sun, and understands sun is actually casting shadows on the wall, and everybody's just looking at projections on the wall. And now this one prisoner sees the truth, goes back into the cave, tells the other prisoners, and they beat him to death because they're like, you're crazy. You lost your mind from leaving the cave. And inside this guy's house, there was this big sign and it said Wave Cave. And I was like, oh my God, I'm inside the cave. I'm trying to tell the other prisoners about real reality and it's just not resonating. And so they're getting violent at me. And so then I sat on his floor and I was like, I will not leave. Somehow I convinced him to make his girlfriend leave the apartment. I was like, just send her away for 5 minutes. I just want a chance to actually explain to you who we are to each other. And I don't even know how he convinced her to leave, but she did. And then we were alone in the apartment and I was sitting on the floor and it was like covered in garbage. It was gross, like dirty house. And he just kept calling me names and telling me how stupid I was and how ridiculous this all was. And he was like recording me on his phone and like laughing. And I just had this moment and I was like, damn, I think I might be wrong. I think that I am making such a fool of myself and this is crazy. And what am I doing here? This guy has rejected me. He doesn't want to know me. Why am I doing this? This is nuts. And I said, maybe I am a piece of trash. Maybe I am totally broken. I'm spaced out. I broke my brain. I did too many drugs. This is nuts. And I hadn't said any of those words out loud, but he began to chuckle as if he heard me. And then I said inside my mind, can you hear me? And he looked really scared because he saw that I wasn't moving my mouth. And he took a step back and he was totally frightened. And so then I stood up and I said inside my mind again, you can hear me, can't you? And then all of a sudden, our entire chakra system opened up and began to connect to one another. And our sacral chakra stayed open. And so it was like we were having this orgasmic experience from 10 feet across the room from each other. And that experience was pulling us like a magnet closer and closer to each other's physical bodies. And when we got right up in front of each other, we looked into each other's eyes. And I have these bright blue eyes. And inside my right eye, I have one brown speck underneath my iris. When I looked into his blue eyes, I realized that he had the exact same brown speck but in the mirrored eye, same spot, mirrored eye. So my right eye, his left eye. So it's literally like looking in a mirror at each other. And once we had this recognition with each other's eyes, our telepathy opened up all the way. And we were downloaded with each other's deepest, darkest shames. And we said them out loud to each other. And then his girlfriend came back, and like we were having still this sacral chakra experience, and we were talking to each other with telepathy, but we were also communicating with her. And now he was like okay with me being in the apartment, but it was all super crazy. He had texted a friend to come and help him earlier in the experience. And the friend texted back just 2 fire emojis. And I was like, look, dude, it's twin flames. It's 2 fire emojis. That's twin flames. So then I left the apartment, and he came around to talk to me. He left his apartment and he came around and he said, okay, I'm ready to listen to you. What is this? And again, I repeated the same information I had said days before. These are our 3D avatars. This isn't who we really are. We're actually divine spirits, and we think that we're human, but you and I have a mission with each other, and we're meant to uplift the consciousness of the planet. And he was just very dismissive, and we separated again. And so this was the catalyst to my recovery journey. I was really strung out on drugs before this experience. I had experienced a spontaneous healing out of heroin withdrawal right before I went to see him. And I knew that my life was going to be about recovery and centered around spirituality, but I thought that it had to be with this guy. And so I went into a long-term treatment facility, and I stayed there for 18 months. I was there for a year and a half, inpatient, with no cell phone, no access to the internet, just healing and feeling and dealing. And oh my God, it was like oceans and tidal waves of emotions were waiting to greet me after my 20 plus year drug addiction, where I had never felt any emotions. And so I was still very obsessed with the idea of this person. I kept getting downloads that he's my twin, but we're in different dimensions, and it might not be in this reality that we come into union. But I absolutely rejected that information. I was like, no, this is not real information that I'm hearing. Like, we're supposed to be together. And once a week, they let us go to the library. And whenever I would go to the library, I would run to the section about religion and spirituality, because I had no access to look up what was happening to me. And so I would just grab all of these books, and I'd go on the computer for a couple of minutes, and I'd do some research, print some stuff out so I could read it at home. And this particular day, it was Halloween of 2019. So 1 year after the whole catalyst experience, where my perception was starting to be opened to these new spiritual things. And I was looking up information about twin flames, obviously. And I was also looking up how to manifest your reality. And this particular article that I was reading said that in order to properly manifest your reality, you must detach from outcome. You cannot be attached to if it happens or how it happens. And so I said out loud to the computer, okay, God, I understand. If it doesn't happen in this lifetime, if we don't come together in union in this lifetime, I accept it. I know that it exists, and that's enough, because this was magic. Somebody had the same eyeball to me. I experienced telepathy with another human being. I didn't know that those things could happen. This was my awareness being blasted open. That was enough for me. And I affirmed it in this moment. And I actually really, truly meant it. And when I walked out of the library, he was standing right outside. The second that I let it go, he magically appeared again. And he was on a moped, and I was like, dude, hello. And he was so scared. And he was like, I don't know you. I don't know you. Stop talking to me. I don't know you. And he drove away. And so I had understood from doing some research around twin flames that we're mirrors to each other. And so if my mirror was saying to me, I don't know you, my reflection is saying, I don't know you, then that means that I don't know me. And so my mission after that became to get to know myself, to develop myself. I was having an opportunity to redesign my whole belief system and who I truly am as a spirit having a human experience. I don't have to be defined by my past, because it doesn't hold any bondage over me because of my information around the pre-birth planning. So now I get to design the future version of myself, my most authentic self. Who do I want to be? And so I started to design her. What's likable about me? What would I want a partner to like about me? What can I offer another individual? And so it really became a self-love journey. And that's my deepest understanding of the twin flame experience. It's not about another person. It doesn't have anything to do with that. This is an internal journey between me balancing my masculine and feminine energies. Now, in my life before all these experiences, I was deeply living in my feminine and masculine shadow. I was in victim mode. I was codependent. I was insecure. That's all my feminine shadow. I was ruthless, abusive, maniacal, and very cold. And that's my masculine shadow. And so my life teetered between those two energies. And so now I have this opportunity to come into my light and integrate my shadow. I can't reject those old versions of me. I have to love them and accept them. And so now it's really about balancing the masculine and feminine light. So my feminine light is about intuition, creativity, spirituality, compassion. And I have an opportunity every day to practice those, stretching those muscles, those spiritual muscles. And my masculine light is about action. These are the steps that I take: structure, discipline, courage. That's all my masculine attribute. And so today I find myself in balance in my energies, not every second of every day, right? I'm still having a human experience, but I will say that the bulk of my life is spent in my light attributes. And I'm so grateful for the awareness that I don't have to be dependent on another human being in order to achieve spiritual balance. And that's my twin flame story.
There's so much goodness in there. And something that kept coming up for me that I want to express gratitude and appreciation around, and a great deal of respect, is how you can reflect on that other version of yourself in a way, in such truth and honesty. And to me, that really shows me that your ego has separated from attachment, right? There's this really beautiful lack of attachment to that identity. And there's so much freedom there. And there's so much ability to surrender to being in the present moment when we recognize that past self is not a reflection of who we are today. And I think that's really beautiful. And you don't have to have a spiritual awakening or a near-death like experience to practice that separation of attachment. And there's so much freedom in recognizing that your past is not who you are today, unless you're repeating that past. I'm very curious from your perspective today, that voice that you said, you recognize that spirit doesn't create demands. Spirit doesn't elicit this feeling of being rushed. So I'm very curious, where do you think that information or that voice or that guidance was or coming from at that time?
That's a really good question. I've thought about that a lot. And I do think that it was some part of my team. I do think that I was being rushed because I was in my end timeline. So in my spiritual experience, I saw all these fractured timelines of what would happen to me if I stayed on particular courses. So there was one reality where I died of a heroin overdose, and my cousin came in and found me dead on the ground. I had been there for days, and she was 8 months pregnant at the time, and my consciousness transferred into her unborn baby. And then I saw all these other realities, and they were all really dark. And the thing about the pre-birth planning is that I know that I have certain plot points mapped out for myself. So 3 of them are addiction, recovery, spiritual awakening. Now, I saw a timeline where I got recovery super early in my life. The first time I ever went to rehab, I was 18 years old. And I saw a timeline where I stayed on that path. And so my spiritual awakening came slow and steady, like very gradual, through working the 12 steps in a 12-step program. And that was my recovery journey as well. Now, in the timeline that I was in when my spiritual experience happened, in this timeline, all of my plot points compounded on top of each other because I was in the end timeline for this. It was either this or death and rebirth in a new body. So in order for me to stay in this body, everything came all at once. So addiction, recovery, spiritual awakening, bam, like a bucket of bricks thrown on my head all at once. So I think that the voice that had that sense of urgency was that certain things had to be done, maybe even for that man's timeline. Maybe that was his catalyst as well, that he needed to get on a different path, and he needed to see how insane the people he was attracting into his life were, that he has like women stalking him, being crazy. So I think that it was a part of my guidance, and it also was an opportunity for me to practice discernment. I didn't know what discernment was. So in order for me to figure out what voice needs to be paid attention to, and what voice is egoic, and what is addiction, and what is spirit, and what is patience, and what is something else, it was an opportunity for me to recognize that as well, that I didn't have any discernment. I was just going off of whatever was coming into my awareness at any given time.
You know what I really love is that in the end you recognized that the twin flame is ultimately a mirror of the self, and comes at a time when we need that mirroring, and that we're ready to reflect on the self and to change the self. And that is something that I would really like to articulate, because a lot of the creation and creators that you see online, who are their main objective and goal is to create content, despite maybe it expressing a very toxic perspective of this particular concept. What I love is that you recognized that this mirror was about you, and that it was a calling to go inside of yourself and to become the masculine and feminine aspects of healthier self, to be your soulmate, right? So everything was internal within you. It was not something external outside of yourself.
Yeah, really well said. And something just came up for me while you were talking that I feel called to share. And this is also in Jungian philosophy as well. Carl Jung, his whole philosophy around life is about this aspect, about this transformation. So starts at self, and then you're born and you go into the mask phase of your life, right? Where we start putting on all these different personalities and all these different masks so that we can get through our human experience. And then from there, we shift into the shadow, which is what happens once you've lived your life wearing masks, you have no idea who your authentic self is. And so you will automatically switch into your shadow. And then from there, you go into the anima and the animus, and that's the feminine and the masculine. And then you go back to the self-actualized self with the capital S. And it's like this whole little journey around. So I think that coming into the awareness of the feminine and the masculine is a very heightened place to be on the spiritual journey. And I'm grateful for the teachers who are out there talking about feminine and masculine. Again, I think that it often gets misconstrued, like how it did for me. I thought that I had to I was like, oh, I can never ascend because this guy won't ascend with me. That's ridiculous. I'm on a path of ascension. I'm on a path of spiritual awakening, and I'm climbing the scale of consciousness any second that I decide to. It's not reliant on another person.
Beautiful. That's so empowering as well. And that's something that Matthias de Stephanos articulates in some of his podcasts. And he really talks about how this is a concept to awaken oneself, to go in and to heal and work with the different attributes of oneself, to become whole person, to come back to the I am, right? And if we look at I am source, I am God, I am just every aspect of I am. I think it's an incredibly beautiful journey that you were on, and I really love what you were able to take away from this. And I really love that you're sharing this story. I do have a couple other questions circling outside of the twin flame concept and into the pre-birth concept. And what I love is that you recognize the numerous potentials that were associated with the different fragments of self. And what I'm very curious about is in the pre-planning phase before coming in, what was your mission or purpose? Was there multiple missions or purposes for you?
Yeah, I love this question because this is another thing that people get distracted with, right? This idea of purpose. Purpose is not rigid because nothing in spirit is rigid. Nothing is urgent. There are no labels. Spirit is fluid, and so is purpose. So, my purpose here is to just be myself. That's literally it. What does that mean? It could mean a million different things all throughout the day. It could My purpose can shift from I have like big goals and dreams. I'm an aspiring author, a motivational speaker, my coaching business. I see that really taking off in a different way and creating workshops and sharing information that I have. If I can change, anybody can, literally. So those are all things that are my highest excitement. Like I follow those things because they bring me joy. But as far as some sort of earth mission, there's no such thing. I don't believe that there is. I understand that there are certain things that I wanted to accomplish here for the development of my soul, but holding a door open for a person is spiritual purpose. Smiling at a stranger on the street, giving up your seat on the subway. Those are all things that are linked to spiritual purpose. So for me, purpose is about aligning with spiritual virtues. Is what I'm doing linked to unconditional love, patience, tolerance, acceptance? Is what I'm doing practicing humility? All of these things, that's what I believe purpose is. So I believe that the same way that the twin flame experience can be a level of distraction, I think the same thing for things like purpose. So I'm really into the simulation theory. That was part of my spiritual download as well. Everything looked just like a video game. And the big boss, like the bad, quote unquote, bad guy of the video game, the King Koopa of this Mario game that we're in, is the actual environment that we live inside of. It is the matrix that we live inside. That is the quote unquote bad guy. And so its whole job is to distract you from your soul essence. And it does a great job. We have so many ways of distracting ourselves through these romantic ideal things inside of our head, like twin flames and soulmates, thinking that we're searching for somebody to complete us, porn or technology addiction or food or drugs or alcohol. And that's just the game doing what it's supposed to do. So it's not innately evil or wrong. It's literally what it's programmed to do. That's its job. So it's up to me to stay steadfast in my spiritual practice, spiritual fitness, and make sure that I'm constantly practicing those spiritual muscles. And for me, that's a big part of my purpose as well, is just to stay present in the moment, because that's where I can thrive.
I also want to reflect that you had mentioned the transition of 3D into 5D and being a support system. And I'm very curious your perspective and what you acquired in terms of information pertaining to that particular subject.
Yeah, thanks for that. So the download was very loud and clear. It was, you're going to Earth to liberate consciousness. I'm pretty sure that Earth doesn't want to be liberated, but whatever, I'm here for it. So they said the level of third dimensional thinking to fifth dimensional thinking. And these are just levels of thought. A third dimensional level of thinking is an ego-centered way of thinking. Materialism, self-centeredness, self-righteousness, things like that. A fifth dimensional level of thinking is a God-centered thought system. And if you don't like the word God, you can replace it with spirit or even service. Again, those spiritual virtues. Is this aligned with unconditional love, patience, tolerance, acceptance, compassion, courage, things like that? The idea is that we're changing our thought systems. And you can see this happen to all of us throughout the day. You might have a moment where you feel real compassionate towards a person, and then you might have a moment where you're full of jealousy and envy. And so and 4D is the awareness. So right now, a lot of us are straddling between these levels. And that's what it's going to be. It's going to be like these ripples and these waves of going back and forth. And then I believe that we'll have a collective kick out of this layer of the dream, where we'll go into another layer of the dream where it's much more God-centered. And those of us who are already in that awareness are paving the way for that. We're creating a whole new grid, a whole new ripple, a whole new stream of consciousness for people just to hop in. It's almost like a net is being lowered, and we're just going to scoop everybody up and come into this different layer of thinking.
So there's a lot of content out there of people believing that in this split planet, the Earth separating itself, which is in terms of vibration, there are families that are going to be separated and people left behind. And I'm wondering if you can further elaborate on that.
Yeah. So I don't, I'm not here to dispel anybody's belief system. If that's what you want to believe, if it makes you happy, which I can't imagine that it could, because that's totally terrifying to think that there's some sort of rapture coming. But if that's what you feel deeply within you, then your truth is your truth. And I don't think that there's one universal truth. I think that the more of us who believe a certain thing, that will be our new reality. If we're all thinking a similar thing, then we all go to that different reality together. And you can see things like this even when you come into spiritual awareness. People fade out of your life. That could be like this level of rapture or like this separation that people are talking about, because this is a dream that we're inside of. Nothing crazy. It's just a dream. It's literally just a dream. Nothing crazy is going to happen. Sometimes dreams are weird, right? What's going on in the outward dream right now is totally bizarre. But if I stay focused on my dreams, I think that as far as this idea that children will be separated from parents, or like that there'll be a lower level and a higher level, I don't believe in anything like that, because I believe in the oneness of humanity. I've felt it. I've seen it. I was shown it. We are all one. So I don't know if you've ever heard of this branch of philosophy. It's called solipsism. And whenever I think about this concept of what does the awakening mean, what will the great solar flash do, I think about the fact that there is a branch of philosophy that says that there is one mind creating everything. Now, who is the one mind? Is it me? Am I the mind? I'd like to think that sometimes. Is it you? Are you the mind? Are you creating me right now? And like you're making me say all these things that I'm saying? Is God the mind? Is the universe source the mind? I don't know what the answer is, but that branch of philosophy in particular helps me understand the oneness. One of the downloads in my spiritual experience was about the movie Inception. So, if you've never seen it, it's basically about this group of architects, they're dream architects, and they go into people's deep subconscious and they like root around and change stuff around and get information that they need. And so I was shown that this world that we live in is Inception. It solidifies that fact about the oneness again. These are just, we're all the projections of someone's deep subconscious, and so we're all going to go together, because once the subconscious rises into another dimension, everything that's inside of it will go with it. So I think that there's a lot of information, and it's just about what brings you the highest excitement. Do you like thinking about rapture and fire and brimstone? If you do, then absolutely continue on your belief system. I think that everything is always working out in divine right order. The people who believe those things, they're supposed to for some reason. And those of us who don't believe in things like that, we're not meant to for some reason. But I don't think that anyone's right or wrong. I don't think that there's one truth to everything. I think that we live in a sea of perception.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many fragments and so many experiences to be had. And what I love about this whole experience and the information that I acquired through my awakening and some continuous mystical experiences regarding unity consciousness is that this is consciousness, and the fragments of self and the potentials are very much this flow. If you are in a particular state of rapture, fire, and brimstone, you're creating that reality based on the ego's addiction and participation in drama, which is associated to fear. So, based on the type of expression that you are participating in is the reality that you create for yourself. And ultimately, these consciousness shifts are these really beautiful ripples, and ripples tend to overbed one another. And it creates this beautiful emphasis and rising of consciousness for those who are overlapping one another. And there is no right or wrong. You are where you are supposed to be, which means you're also creating the reality that's associated with your belief system. So if you do not like the reality that you're in, you are an architect of your reality. You are a creator. And through shifting your mindset, your belief systems, you can change your reality, which means you also participate in a different consciousness, which means that you participate in different vibration.
Definitely. I love
Yeah.
everything that you just said. It's so true. Because I recognize even now that I was creating my reality before my spiritual experience.
Yeah.
Because my thoughts, your thoughts, all of our thoughts shape our
Mhm.
reality. That's one truth that I know is most certainly a real truth.
Yes.
So my thoughts before were I'm impoverished, I'm addicted to drugs, and I have to do devious things to make money. I hate my life. And so that was my
Mhm.
reality. And then I started shifting my thoughts. I
Mhm.
love my life. I'm immersed in spiritual community. I practice spiritual principles on a daily basis. I
Mhm.
love my life. And
Mhm.
so then that became my reality. So the same way that if you are looking for confirmation of something, so
Yeah.
for instance, being in the near death experience world, about 2% of near death experiences are distressing near death experiences or like hellish experiences. And people who are looking for that information, that they want to know that there's a hell, they'll find more and more evidence
Mhm.
of that reality. And
Mhm.
those people who are looking for confirmation that there is no condemnation, that heaven is all that there is, that there's unconditional love, that we're all
Mhm.
divinely loved, they'll
Mhm.
find evidence of that. So, yeah, where your perception goes is the reality that you'll create.
Yes. And for people who are wanting to look at themselves more to see where they're at, your language will tell you everything you need to know. If you're using criticism and judgment of others, if you're looking at what separates you from the other person across from you, if you are in defensiveness when your reality is mirrored back to you from somebody, and you're looking at that person as though they're the conflict rather than looking at yourself, if you are hating yourself, hating your life, just that word, just saying that word has so much gravity and density to me. It's a very difficult word for me to use. And there are people who actively use that on a daily basis to describe themselves, their lives, or other people. Look at your language. Your language will tell you where you're at vibrationally and the reality that you're creating for yourself. And I want to invite you, there is a reality that you can live in where it is, I love my experience. I love myself. I love these challenges that I'm encountering. I love the differences between you and me. I love what separates us and makes us individual, but I also love everything that exists that is that brings us together, that mirrors how like we are. And that's where we get to really start playing around with oneness and unity consciousness and recognizing that everyone is actually a reflection of self.
Yeah, and I think that is the practicing of that spiritual muscle as well. In order to deconstruct and rebuild a belief system,
Mhm.
it requires consistency. And I'm in a 12-step program to assist me with my addiction to all things. And for me, practicing the 12 steps is a reprogramming. I also am a teacher and a student of A Course in Miracles, and
Yes.
that's a metaphysical text channeled by Jesus. And there's a workbook inside of it, and there's one lesson for every day of the year. And so I highly recommend that if you're looking to start to
Mhm.
reconstruct some belief systems. I would also recommend getting a book about the course before you actually get the course, because it's
Mhm.
quite dense. I recommend A Course in Miracles Made Easy by Alan Cohen until I write my own Course in Miracles book.
I love your enthusiasm. I also want to reflect the gentleman that created 12-step program. I might be wrong, but I feel like I heard that it was a download.
Yeah,
So
it was originally, yes, it was. It was a download. He took a large quantity of LSD and he had a white light experience. He had a near death like experience, and that's when he was downloaded with the solution to so many people's maladies. It's amazing.
yeah, and Course in Miracles, which I'm a student of as well, is channeled. And the gene keys, which I'm also a huge fan of, and I incorporate it into my work. So if you really are interested in learning the shadow aspects of humanity as a whole, and then also doing the hologenetic profile, creating your hologenetic profile, you can learn of the shadows that really are a huge part of your personal journey. So that's another great book. But I love the information that you're putting out there and really supporting individuals in doing the inner work and self-awareness, questioning of self, reflection of self. And I'm so grateful for you sharing your story with such beautiful transparency. And again, I really celebrate your ability to look at your past and be detached egoically and recognize that your past has nothing to do with your presence or your future, that being present now and what you do now is truly what's going to allow the potential, or you to decide which potential of your future that you take on.
It's the greatest freedom that there is, truly, to be present.
Thank you so much. I have so much gratitude and appreciation. And I do look forward to many more of these talks and having you on again.
Yes, grateful for you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.